The Alpha King's pup cried on Christmas night until the new maid looked closer and froze. An original story by Maggie Reed. Prologue. The crying began on Christmas night. Not the usual fussing of a hungry baby, not the late-night whimpers that stop when a bottle appears. This was different. Raw, rending, a sound that made grown wolves clamp their hands over their ears. A ghost lament threading through the stone corridors of the northern keep. For 3 months, no one could quiet him. 6 nannies had come, 6 had left, some in tears, others slipping out before dawn, whispering about curses and dark magic. The doctors shook their heads, empty-handed. The witches murmured uneasy prophecies, and King Dominic watched his son fade, helpless, while something unseen drew the light out of those small gold eyes. Mikhail was dying, slowly, mysteriously, and no one knew why. Nina knew none of that when she walked through the gates on that knife-cold December morning. She only knew she needed work, that she'd been cast out and left with nothing, that this was the last chance between her and the winter. She didn't believe in fate, not after what she'd lost. But when she climbed those stairs and heard the crying through the stone, something in her woke. Ancient instinct, impossible recognition, every cell in her body whispering, "Go to him." The door opened, and she saw a baby too small and too pale, eyes fever-bright with hurting. Nina did what none of the nannies before her had done. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask permission. She gathered that child into her arms. The world broke open in gold. The mark burned to life in an instant, over 2 hearts, binding guardian and child in a bond nothing could sever. The crying cut off. The baby breathed like it was the first time in months. And when the king burst into the room, dragged there by the surge of magic, he found what he'd been searching for without knowing it. The one soul in the world who could save his son, and maybe, just maybe, could save him too. Nina didn't yet know that a simple embrace had called ancient magic back into the world, that blood curses would be broken, or that a lone wolf without a pack could become a queen. She only knew that, for the first time since losing everything, something made sense. This baby needed her. And against all logic, she needed him too. Chapter 1. The crying knifed through the stone like a blade. Nina stopped in the cold corridor of the northern keep, her little suitcase still on her shoulder, and felt the sound cut into something deep in her chest. This wasn't the stormy protest of a spoiled child. It was despair. Clean, undiluted. The kind of sound that made a wolf's instincts snarl protect, even when she didn't have the power to protect anyone, least of all herself. "This way," said a clipped voice at her side. Martha, the housekeeper, marched without looking back, disapproval stiff in every line of her posture. "You're the 7th in 3 months. The others ran, or were dismissed." 7th. Nina swallowed and tightened her grip on the handle. She needed this job. Desperately. After her pack exiled her for dishonoring the family, a crime she hadn't committed, there were no second chances. A lone wolf. No family. No references. Just 26 years of survival and a stubbornness that wouldn't let her quit. "The pup has issues," Martha said as they stopped at a heavy oak door. The crying spiked, sharp as glass. "He cries without stopping. Won't keep food down. Doesn't sleep. The physicians find nothing wrong, but..." She let the sentence die and finally met Nina's eyes. There was something like warning there. Or pity. "The king is desperate, and desperate alphas..." Martha shook her head. "Do what you can. Don't expect miracles." The door opened. It should have been a cozy nursery. Soft forest murals, a carved wooden crib, toys scattered like bright little promises. But the air felt wrong, heavy, as if something invisible was swallowing the light. A young nanny in a rumpled uniform hovered over the crib, her eyes raw. She turned as Nina stepped in, and exhaustion was etched into every line of her face. "You're the new one?" she rasped. "Good luck. You'll need it." The pup wailed on. Nina moved closer, and the cry changed. Thinner, more frantic, like he could smell a stranger. "He doesn't stop," the nanny said, grabbing her bag. "I've tried everything. Rocking, singing, walking bottles. He just cries. Like he's dying on the inside." Nina finally looked down. Her heart stuttered. He wasn't a newborn, maybe 6 months. Fine dark hair, skin too pale. But it was his eyes that caught her. When he blinked them open between sobs, they were gold, bright and impossible. The eyes of a pure-blood alpha, and something else. An alert flared in her, lupine and ancient. He wasn't only crying, he was searching, reaching for something he couldn't find. "What's his name?" she whispered. "Mikhail," the nanny called from the doorway. "King Dominic's son, heir to the Northern Territories, and if you listen to the whispers, cursed. Cursed." The word hung in the air after the nanny was gone. Nina stood alone with the crying pup. Martha had vanished as well, muttering about time to adjust. Slowly, carefully, Nina reached for the crib. "Hi, Mikhail," she murmured, fingertips brushing the warm little arm. "I'm Nina. I don't know if I can help, but I'll try." The crying hitched. Just for a heartbeat, but she felt it. He went still and fixed those golden eyes on her with a focus far too intent for a baby. And then he cried again, softer this time, like he was too tired to fight at full strength. Nina did the reckless, obvious thing. She picked him up. The world tilted. Heat burst under her sternum. Not pain, but shock. The sensation of a long-dead ember catching flame. Nina sucked in a breath and looked down. Mikhail had stopped crying. Completely. His gold eyes were wide, locked on her face. Slowly, as if seeing sunlight for the first time, he smiled. Small, shaky, real. "What?" Nina breathed as something seared warm on her chest. She glanced down through her blouse. A sigil blazed over her heart. Gold, bright as dawn, like a small shield laced with stars. Mikhail had the same mark, same place, glowing through the fabric of his onesie. "No," she whispered, panic lifting like a tide. "That can't— What is this?" "It's the mirror heart mark." The voice came from the door. Nina turned so fast Mikhail grunted. She tightened her hold, her body instinctively angling between the baby and the man in the doorway. He was tall enough to brush the frame, broad shoulders filling a dark shirt, black hair falling over a worried brow, and his eyes, gold like the child's, but older, harder. They studied her like she was a riddle he intended to solve. "Who are you?" Nina asked, hating the tremor in her voice. The corner of his mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Dominic, his father, the king." Air rushed out of her. She was holding the Alpha King's son, a strange mark burning bright over both their hearts, and the king himself was watching with an expression she couldn't read. "The mirror heart mark," Dominic said, stepping in with a predator's grace that made Nina's wolf want to back up, though she didn't. Mikhail settled deeper against her, his tiny hand fisting into her blouse. "Old magic, so rare I thought it a myth." He stopped a few paces away, gaze falling to where Mikhail had gone boneless in peace. When an alpha pup is cut off from something vital, a piece of soul, let's say, he fades. He cries. He rejects all comfort, until he finds the one who carries the missing half. His gold eyes found hers, and when he does, the mark appears. The bond sets. Protector and protected. Guardian and child. Nina shook her head and stepped back. "No, I'm a nanny. I'm not whatever you think I am." "You are my son's guardian," Dominic said, each word heavy as stone. "Which means, Nina, yes, I know your name. You've just become the most important person in this keep. Maybe in the entire North." He took another step. Power came off him in waves. Pure alpha. Dangerous as a cliff in winter. But there was something else in his eyes now. Relief. "For 3 months," he said, voice roughening. "I've watched him suffer with no way to stop it. He would not be soothed. Doctors, witches, elders, no one could help him. Then you walked in. Minutes later, he is quiet." Dominic looked at his son, and the raw vulnerability in that glance cracked something in Nina's defenses. "Please," he said, barely above a whisper. "Don't leave. Don't put him down. Whatever this mark means, whatever you are to him, he needs you. A beat. Softer still. We both do. Holding the baby finally at peace, the mark warm as breath over her heart, Nina realized something terrifying. She couldn't say no. Not when two identical pairs of golden eyes, father and son, looked at her like she was the answer to every prayer they'd never dared to speak, even if it meant staying in a castle with an alpha king whose presence made her heart race in ways that had nothing to do with fear. "I'll stay," she heard herself say. "For him. Not for you," she didn't say. But from the way his eyes lit, he heard it anyway. "For now," he agreed. "That's enough." But when the door closed behind him, Nina looked down at the sleeping child in her arms and felt the truth hum through the mark. Nothing about this would ever be enough. Because the mirror heart hadn't only bound her to the son. Somehow it had started binding her to the father too, and that was more dangerous than any ancient spell. Chapter 2. Nina didn't sleep that night. How could she, when the baby finally rested in her arms, his breathing soft and steady for the first time in months, and the mark pulsed gently over her heart, a warm reminder of an impossible bond now alive under her skin. She rocked beside the crib and tried to understand her new reality. Guardian. The word rang like a bell. She could barely take care of herself. How was she supposed to guard the heir to a kingdom? Dawn ghosted through the curtains. The door eased open. Dominic. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Same clothes, shadowed eyes. But when he saw Mikhail sleeping, something in his face unknotted, and the sight tightened Nina's chest. "All night?" he asked, voice rough. Nina nodded. He stirred twice. I held him. He settled. Not the whole truth. Mikhail had jolted awake crying both times, but the second she lifted him, the grief broke like weather, as if her arms were the only place that made sense. Dominic moved with careful steps, as if sound alone could shatter what they'd found. When he stopped at her side, so close she felt his heat, she had to will her body not to tremble. He knelt, slowly, bringing himself level with her. "Thank you," he said, and the gratitude in his voice burned behind her eyes. "You can't know what it is to watch your child suffer and be powerless." "I can," she said, before she could stop herself. She bit her lip, wishing the words back, but Dominic just studied her in that focused way of his. "Can you?" Nina looked down at Mikhail, safer ground. "I had a little sister. She got sick when I was 16. I couldn't save her. I could only watch." The old pain flickered, not dulled by time. Her sister Luna gone at 8 to an illness no one could cure. The beginning of the end for Nina in a pack that needed a scapegoat more than it needed truth. "I'm sorry," Dominic said, and he meant it. "Loss like that leaves scars." "It does." She met his eyes again. "But I don't want Mikhail to be another scar. I'll do whatever I can to keep him safe." Something changed in his gaze, not just gratitude. Something personal. "The mark," he said, a nod toward the glow through both their shirts, "was always said to bind a guardian willing to give their life for the child." "I know," she lied, because she hadn't known any of this yesterday. "There's more." He hesitated, choosing words. "When the mark binds to an alpha heir, the guardian sometimes forms additional bonds. With the father, the magic tries to make the home whole." Her pulse tripped. "What kind of bonds?" "Companionship," he said plainly. "Not immediate, not forced, but the door is there. An invitation. You're saying this mark could make me your mate? I'm saying there's precedent, and that if it happened," he held her gaze, "it wouldn't be the worst thing. For you," Nina countered, the old hurt bristling. "A king gets a convenient guardian and a convenient mate in one neat package. Efficient." Pain shadowed his eyes. He stood, and the loss of his closeness hit harder than it should. "Do you think I would use magic to trap a woman?" he asked quietly. She pulled Mikhail closer, protective without knowing against what. Her instincts were a tangle, one voice urging trust while another warned retreat. "I don't know you," she said, keeping her tone level. "I don't know what kind of man you are." "Then let me show you." He folded his arms, posture closing, but his voice stayed measured. "Stay." Not as a prisoner, as a guest. Protect Mikkel, because clearly only you can. Learn me. Learn this place. Then decide. Decide what? Whether you want to walk through the door this magic opened, or keep it only about my son. She blinked. I get to choose? Always. The intensity returned. Magic opens doors, Nina. You decide if you step through. The room went quiet, but for Mikhail's peaceful breathing. I'll stay, she said at last. For him, I'll consider the rest. No promises. No promises, he echoed, and surprised her with a real smile, brief and bright, making him look younger, less tired, dangerously handsome. May I hope? Against her better judgment, her mouth tilted. You can try. He left a few minutes later, looking back 3 times like a man who couldn't help checking that his world hadn't vanished. When the door closed, Nina whispered to the sleeping baby, What did we do, little one? What did we just start? Mikkel yawned and nuzzled closer. The mark warmed, settling into the steady cadence of her heartbeat, as if to answer, exactly where you're meant to be. Chapter 3. Days found a rhythm. Nina stayed with Mikhail, whose peace held as if her presence were a spell. In her arms he was curious and bright, laughing, clutching her fingers, cooing nonsense that melted her. The mark never stopped its gentle pulse, a quiet tether tugging through the hours. Dominic came often, always with a reason, to check on his son, to bring a new toy, to ask whether she needed anything. But there was something else beneath the errands. He watched her, not like a hungry man, but like a careful one, committing details to memory, the way she sang while changing him, how her hands were sure, how she laughed when Mikhail surprised her. You're a natural, he said one morning from the doorway. Nina sat cross-legged on the rug, Mikhail propped in her lap. I used to care for my sister, she said. Some things you don't forget. It's more than memory. He came in and sat on the floor a few feet away, informal enough to startle her. It's instinct. You're connected to him beyond the mark. Mikhail noticed his father and windmilled his arms. Dominic's rare smile lit his face as he offered 2 fingers, which the baby grabbed tight. He has your strength, Nina said. And your eyes, he answered, meeting her gaze. Gold, mark of a born alpha. He'll be powerful, like his father, hopefully better than his father, he said wryly. I've made my share of mistakes. The question she'd been circling finally found words. Where is his mother? The air tightened. Dominic looked past her, jaw setting. She died. In childbirth. I'm sorry, I didn't know. How could you? Pain flashed, old and clean as bone. Isabel. That was her name. A political match. There was respect between us. Friendship. No love. He touched Mikhail's downy hair with care. When she died, bringing him into the world, I thought I would lose him too. He was so small, so fragile. But he fought. And then, 6 months later, the crying began, and didn't stop. Until I walked in. Until you walked in. His eyes held hers. As if he knew. As if he'd been waiting for you from the start. It was too much. Nina glanced at Mikhail. You said the mark is rare. How does it actually work? Dominic took a breath. When an alpha pup is born, his soul looks for anchors. Usually that means his parents. But sometimes, in exceptional cases, it searches for something else. A guardian. Someone whose essence completes what even blood can't reach. He nodded toward the glow over both their hearts. When that person appears, the mirror heart mark manifests. It binds guardian and child at a level that defies logic. The guardian senses danger, calms what no one else can. And in return, the guardian is drawn into the family, not by blood, by choice the magic itself makes. And if the child's father is available, well, he didn't have to finish. She understood. The magic tries to knit a whole home, she said softly. Yes. He leaned in, close enough that she could see flecks in the gold of his eyes. But it doesn't force. It offers. We choose. She should have backed away. Set a boundary. But something in the way he looked at her, no heat, just that bone-deep recognition, kept her still. And if I don't want that path, then we don't take it. You keep caring for me, Kyle. I keep out of your way. Nothing changes. But you want it to. Not a question. He didn't flinch. I want to know the woman my son chose. I want to understand why, among all the wolves in the world, the magic pointed to you. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. I want to know if you feel it too, this pull, this curiosity, or if it's only me wanting too much from an impossible situation. She couldn't breathe, because yes, she felt it. From the first moment he'd filled the doorway, something in her had reached back, not just to his body, though God knew that pull was there, but to the soul under the armor, like her wolf had recognized his. I feel it, she whispered, and it scares me. The relief that broke across his face was devastating. Why? Because the last time I trusted someone, it destroyed me, she said, the old blade sliding in again. My pack accused me of something I didn't do, exiled me, left me with nothing. So forgive me if I'm slow to trust a king who could break me with a word, mark or not. He didn't touch her, though she could feel the effort it took him to keep his hands to himself. Instead, he stepped close enough for his presence to wrap her like a cloak. I'm not your old pack, he said, steady. I won't use you. I won't weaponize your hurt. And if it takes years for you to believe that, then I will take years. Mikhail chose that moment to bang a toy against the floor, the sharp clack snapping the tension. Both of them laughed, shaky but real. The timing, Nina said, wiping at her eyes. Just like his father. Dominic stood and offered his hand. Come, there's something I want you to see. She hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she took it and pretended not to notice the way that simple touch sent heat up her arm to settle, dangerously, near her heart. Chapter 4. Dominic led her through the keep's corridors. Mikhail carried close. He didn't let go of Nina's hand until they stood before a pair of carved double doors, wolves running beneath a ring of moons. These were Isabel's rooms, he said, voice gone low with respect. They've been locked since she died. But I want them to be yours, if you'll have them. Nina blinked. I already have the room next to Mikhail's, which is small and dim. Fine for a nanny, not for my son's guardian. He pushed the doors. And certainly not for someone I hope will become more. The breath left her. No frills, no sugary pinks or crowded lace. Elegance instead. Cream walls washed with warm light, floor-to-ceiling windows opening onto the mountains, a bed, like a cloud in shades of ivory. A little library wandered along one wall, the shelves full of books that called to her. Through a half-open door sat a smaller room, perfect for a child. Mikhail could sleep there, Dominic said, following her gaze. Close enough to hear him, with space to grow. You'd have privacy but still be there when he needs you. It was perfect. Unnervingly so. Why are you doing this? Nina asked, turning to face him. All of this. You barely know me. He released her hand at last and walked to the window. For a long moment he only stared at the snow-drowned peaks. Because for 3 months I watched my son fade, he said finally. Each day worse than the last. The most powerful alpha king in the north, and I couldn't save my own child. He turned. Nothing guarded in his eyes now. Only the bare truth. You saved him. In minutes. By being you. How could I treat you as anything less than a gift? Her chest ached. I'm not a gift. I'm a wolf without a pack who needed a job. You're so much more. He closed the space between them. And I will spend whatever time it takes proving it, until you believe me. Mikhail squirmed and made a hungry sound, and the moment broke. Someone's hungry, Nina said, grateful. I'll have a bottle sent up, Dominic said, moving toward the door before pausing. Nina? Thank you. For considering this. For not running. He left. Nina walked the rooms with Mikhail content against her shoulder, discovering little luxuries she'd never had. A private bath with a deep tub, a closet big enough for dresses she didn't own, a balcony that tasted like cold stars. What do you think, little one? She whispered. This is getting complicated, isn't it? Mikhail only smiled at her with his father's eyes, as if to say, complicated doesn't mean wrong. 2 weeks blurred past in small rituals and quiet changes. Nina moved into the new rooms. Mikhail thrived, putting on weight, laughing more, trying to roll. Dominic showed up in ways she hadn't expected. Dinner each night, playing on the carpet like any dad, not a distant king, and talking with her about everything, childhood, fears, the dreams she'd once had before everything cracked. He shared too, the weight of the crown, the marriage that had been friendship but never love, the loneliness of ruling. Sometimes, he admitted as they sat on the balcony one night while Mikhail slept, I wonder if the throne is worth what it costs. Freedom, choice, the chance to be just Dominic. Nina studied him in the starlight. So why not give it up? Because thousands depend on me. Because my son needs stability. And because... He looked at her, the word hanging between them like a vow not yet spoken. I haven't found anything worth more. She should have steered away. She didn't. And if you did, then maybe, he said softly, I'd finally learn what living feels like. Their fingers brushed on the railing. Not an accident. She didn't pull away. But peace didn't last. In the 3rd week, the mark seared her awake. Not its gentle warmth. The sharp burn of warning. Nina ran to Mikhail's room and froze. He lay in his crib, eyes open and emptied out. A dark mist glimmered around him like something alive. Mikhail! She lunged. The moment she lifted him, the fog shredded. He blinked, focused on her, and began to cry. A normal, frightened cry, not that terrible despair. What happened? Dominic's voice thundered from the door. He was barefoot, hair mussed, half-dressed, wild with fear. I don't know, Nina said, clutching Mikhail close. There was a dark fog, and he was... She couldn't finish. He had looked dead. Dominic went pale. In 2 strides he was there, hands checking the baby, then her face. Did the mark burn? Yes. It woke me. The curse, he breathed, stepping back like he'd been hit. Damn it. I thought we had more time. What curse? Panic iced her voice. He dragged a hand through his hair, warring with himself, then faced her. There's something I didn't tell you, he said. Why Mikhail started crying. Why the mirror heart appeared. He took a breath. My son isn't just searching for a guardian. He's bound to a curse. It was laid on my bloodline generations ago. The only way to break it is to find someone whose heart is pure enough to anchor him. The floor dropped away. You knew, she whispered. You knew I wasn't just soothing him. I was saving him, Dominic said. Yes, I should have told you. I was afraid. Of what? Of you running. His voice broke. Of losing the one person who could save my child. And of... He stepped close, the last words ragged. Of losing you. The mark flared, fierce as a star. Mikhail whimpered. And Nina understood with a clarity that stole her breath. Everything was about to change. Chapter 5. Tell me everything, Nina demanded, her voice gone cold in a way Dominic had never heard. Now. She still held Mikhail, rocking him gently though her eyes were ice-fixed on the king. The mark pulsed erratically on her chest, answering both rage and fear. Dominic closed his eyes. When he opened them, defeat lived there. 200 years ago, my ancestor, King Alpha Matthias, did something unforgivable. He forced himself on a witch under his protection. When she rejected him, he had her executed. But before she died, she cursed him. He walked to the window, unable to face her. Every male heir in his line would be born with part of his soul missing. A void that could only be filled by finding a pure heart. Someone capable of true, selfless love. If the child didn't find that person before his first birthday, the void would consume everything. The child would die. Air left Nina's lungs. Mikhail is 6 months old. 6.5, Dominic corrected, voice raw. We have 5.5 months left. And you didn't think to mention this? Nina's anger was ice and fire at once. That I'm not just caring for him, I'm fighting a curse on a deadline? I know. Dominic turned, unshed tears bright in his eyes. I know it was wrong. But every other woman we brought in, when they learned about the curse, they ran. or demanded impossible payment, or tried, but the mark never appeared because their hearts weren't pure. He took a step toward her. You were the first the mark chose, the first Mikhail recognized, and I was too desperate to risk losing you before you saw who he is, who you are to him. So you manipulated me. Yes. No denial. Just raw truth. And I hate myself for it. Nina looked at Mikhail in her arms. The baby had calmed, fingers gripping her shirt, absolute trust in his eyes. He didn't understand curses or lies. He only knew he was safe with her. The dark fog, she said finally. What was it? The curse manifesting, Dominic explained. As the deadline gets closer, it gets stronger. It tries to consume what's left of his soul. The mark warned you because you're his anchor now, the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. The mark burned again, as if agreeing. How do we break it? Nina asked. It can't just be my presence, or the curse would already be gone. Dominic hesitated. In that pause, Nina saw the truth before he spoke. No, she whispered. Don't. The breaking ritual, Dominic said quietly, requires the pure heart to bind permanently to the cursed bloodline, not just to the child, but to the entire family. Marriage. The word came out flat. Soul union, technically, but yes, essentially marriage. Between the pure heart and the cursed child's father. Nina stepped back, shaking her head. So your plan all along was to make me fall for you. Use your son as bait to trap me in a marriage that would break the curse. No. Dominic crossed the space in 3 strides, stopping only when he was too close, too intense. My plan was to save my son. But what I feel for you, Nina, that's not part of any plan. His hand rose, hovering near her face. You challenge me. Make me laugh. Make me want to be better. When you walk into a room, the whole world gets brighter. And if there were no curse, no obligation, I would still want you. Still beg for a chance to prove I could make you happy. How can I believe you? Nina whispered, tears finally falling. How do I know this isn't all part of the ritual? You can't, Dominic admitted, and the honesty hurt. You can only decide if it's worth the risk. If saving Mikhail is worth binding yourself to me. If exploring what we feel is worth the price. He stepped back then, giving her the space she needed. I won't force you, even if it means losing my son, even if it destroys me. You have a choice, Nina, always. Nina looked at Mikhail, then at Dominic. 2 pairs of identical gold eyes, both waiting for her verdict. An innocent baby who hadn't chosen to be cursed, and a desperate father who'd hidden the truth, but whose pain was undeniable. How long do I have to decide? She asked finally. The ritual needs to happen before Mikhail's first birthday, but the sooner, the stronger the protection. Dominic swallowed. Ideally, within a month. 1 month. To decide the rest of her life. I need to think, Nina said, moving toward the door with Mikhail. Nina, Dominic called when she reached the threshold. I'm sorry, for everything, but I'll never regret you coming into our lives. She didn't answer. Just left, carrying the baby back to her rooms. When the door closed behind her, Nina sank onto the bed, holding Mikhail against her chest while tears finally fell. Because the terrible truth was, she already cared too much. About the baby who trusted her completely, and about the father whose vulnerability broke down every wall she tried to build. The mark pulsed warmly, as if whispering, you already know the answer. But knowing the answer and being ready to accept it were very different things. Chapter 6. Nina avoided Dominic for the next 3 days. Not completely. He still came to see Mikhail, but she kept it brief, professional. When he tried to talk about anything beyond the baby, she deflected. When his eyes followed her with that aching intensity, she pretended not to notice. But she noticed. God, how she noticed. And the mark didn't help. Each day it burned stronger, not painfully, but insistently, as if trying to push them together. On the 4th night, Nina was in her library, Mikhail finally asleep after a fussy day, when someone knocked. Come in, she said, expecting a maid. Dominic entered carrying a tray with tea and something wrapped in cloth. "Thought you might be hungry," he said carefully. "You barely touched dinner." Nina wanted to send him away, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Dominic smiled, small, sad. "I'll take that as an invitation." He set the tray down, gesturing to the chairs by the fire. Nina hesitated, then sat. Dominic took the opposite chair, keeping respectful distance. For a moment, only the fire's crackle filled the silence. "I brought you something," Dominic said finally, pushing the wrapped bundle across the table. Nina eyed it warily. "What is it?" "Open it." With hesitant fingers, she unwrapped the cloth. Inside was a book, old, leather-bound, pages yellowed with age. The title was in an ancient language, but Nina could make it out. "Chronicles of the Mirror Heart Mark. Founded in the Royal Library," Dominic explained. "It documents every known case of the mark over the centuries. I thought you'd want to read it, to understand what you're facing." Nina opened the book carefully. The pages were filled with stories, some tragic, others beautiful. Guardians who'd sacrificed everything. Families formed against impossible odds. "Why give me this?" she asked softly. "Because you deserve the whole truth. Not just my version. The complete story." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "And because some of these stories end well, Nina. Even when they start in desperation." Nina held the book to her chest. "What if ours doesn't? Then at least we tried?" His voice roughened. "But Nina, I believe it can. I believe in us." "How?" Frustration finally spilled over. "How can you be so sure when this all started with lies?" Dominic went quiet for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he began to speak. "When Isabel died, something in me died too. Not romantic love, we never had that, but hope. The idea that the throne could be more than duty, that I could be more than the king I inherited." He looked at the fire. "I spent 6 months watching Mikhail suffer, knowing it was my fault, my bloodline, my cursed blood. Every night he cried was another reminder that I'd failed. As king, as father." His voice broke. "Then you appeared, and in minutes, he was at peace. And Nina, for the first time in months, I breathed, really breathed, because someone had done what I couldn't." He finally looked at her, tears undisguised in his eyes. "So yes, I hid the truth because I was desperate. But everything I felt after, every moment laughing with you, every conversation, every time my heart raced when you entered a room, that was real. That is real." Nina felt her own tears fall. "I don't know if I can trust that. Trust you." "I know." Dominic stood, moving toward the door. "And I won't pressure you. But Nina, if you decide to try, if you decide to give me a chance, I promise I'll spend every day proving you deserve all the happiness this world can offer." He stopped at the threshold looking back. "And if you decide you can't, I'll respect that too, even if it kills me." After he left, Nina held the book and cried. Cried for the confusion, the anger, the fear, but also for the terrible, awful truth she couldn't deny anymore. She was falling for Dominic. Despite the lies, despite the manipulation, despite everything. And that realization scared her more than any curse. Chapter 7. The answer came unexpectedly. 5 days after the library conversation, Nina was playing with Mikhail in the gardens. The baby loved feeling grass under his hands, giggling each time a breeze ruffled the flowers. That's when the mark seared. Hard. Agonizing. Elena screamed, curling over Mikhail to protect him. But it wasn't the baby in danger this time. It was her. Dark mist materialized from nowhere, wrapping around her. Nina felt cutting cold, followed by whispers. Ancient voices speaking a language she didn't understand, but that froze her blood. "Nina!" Dominic's voice roared. She felt strong arms pulling her back, away from the fog. The mist dissolved. Nina stood trembling in Dominic's arms, Mikhail crying between them. Guards rushed around them, weapons drawn, searching for threats. "What was that?" she managed. "The curse," Dominic said, voice tight with fear. "It's getting more aggressive." It's not just attacking Mikhail anymore. It's trying to drive you away from him. He held her tighter. It knows you're his anchor, and it's trying to break the bond. Nina looked at Mikhail, who'd calmed the moment he realized she was safe. The baby reached tiny hands to her face, touching her tear-wet cheeks. Something in Nina broke, or maybe fixed. "Do the ritual," she said abruptly. Dominic froze. "What?" "The ritual, to break the curse." Nina faced him, determination replacing fear. "I'll do it." "Nina, you don't have to decide now. You're scared, in shock." "I'm clear-headed," she cut him off. "And I realized something. This curse won't stop. It'll keep trying to separate us, trying to hurt him. And I can't. I won't sit back and watch that happen." She touched Dominic's face, mirroring Mikhail's gesture. "You lied. You hid the truth. And that still hurts. But I also understand why. And more important, I trust you won't hurt me. Not intentionally. Not the way my old pack did." "How can you be sure?" Dominic whispered, raw vulnerability in his voice. "Because the way you look at your son, with love so fierce it hurts to watch, tells me everything. And the way you look at me," she paused, gathering courage, "makes me want to believe in happy endings again." "Nina." Her name came out like a prayer. "Do the ritual," she repeated. "Save your son. And then we'll figure out what it means to be a family. For real. No curses or obligations. Just the three of us." Dominic didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled her into a kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was hunger and relief and promise. It was months of tension breaking, feelings denied finally set free. When they pulled apart, both trembling, the mark on their chests glowed so bright it lit the whole garden. "Tomorrow," Dominic said, hoarse. "We'll do it tomorrow before the curse attacks again." "Tomorrow," Nina agreed. And as they walked back to the keep, Dominic carrying Mikhail, his other hand laced with Nina's, she felt it. Peace. Finally. Not because everything was perfect, but because she'd made a choice, and she was ready to live with the consequences. Chapter 8. The night before the ritual, Nina couldn't sleep. She lay in the big bed, watching moonlight through the windows, when she heard footsteps, hesitant, in the hall. The door opened slowly. Dominic stood there, barefoot, hair mussed, wearing just pants and a half-buttoned shirt. He looked nothing like the imposing king, just a scared man. "I can't sleep," he admitted, "thinking about tomorrow, and I needed to see you. Make sure you're still here, that this is real." Nina sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. "I'm here." Dominic came in, closing the door. But he didn't approach the bed. He sat in the chair by the fire, keeping distance. "Tell me something," he said suddenly. "Something no one else knows about you." Nina blinked at the shift, then understood. He was trying to really know her. Not the guardian, not the pure heart, just Nina. "I used to want to be a singer," she confessed. "When I was a kid, I'd sing to my sister every night. Dreamed of traveling, performing for packs everywhere." "Why didn't you?" "Because in my pack, beta daughters didn't sing. They married well, had pups. And when my sister died, my value dropped even more. I was just the defective daughter who couldn't save the favorite." Old pain pulsed, but duller than before. "That's why you understand Mikhail," Dominic said quietly. "You know what it's like to be judged for something beyond your control." "Yes." Nina studied him across the room. "Your turn. Something no one knows." Dominic was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I'm afraid of the dark." Nina blinked, surprised. "What?" "Since I was a kid. My father used to lock me in dark rooms as punishment. Said alphas couldn't fear anything, so I learned to hide it. But I still hate being alone in the dark." He gave a humorless laugh. "Pathetic, right? The powerful king afraid of shadows." "It's not pathetic," Nina said firmly. "It's human. It's real." She slipped out of bed, crossing the room to stand before him. Slowly, she offered her hand. "Stay," she said. "Tonight. You don't have to be alone in the dark." Dominic's eyes widened. "Nina, I didn't come here expecting—" "I know," she smiled. small but genuine. But tomorrow changes everything. And tonight, I want you to know I'm choosing you. Not out of obligation, but because I want to. Dominic took her hand, letting her pull him up. But when they reached the bed, he just held her. Gently. Respectfully. Can we just lie together? He asked, hesitant. I only want to hold you. Feel that you're here. Nothing more. Nothing more, Nina agreed. They lay down together, Dominic on his back, Nina curled against his side, head on his chest, his arm wrapped around her, holding like she might vanish. Nina? He murmured in the darkness. Yes? Thank you. For giving me a chance. For choosing us. She tightened her grip on his shirt. Thank you for waiting. For letting me come to this on my own terms. I'd wait forever for you, Dominic said. Even if it took 1,000 years. And that night, wrapped in each other's arms, both finally slept. No fear. No nightmares. Just peace. Chapter 9. The ritual happened at dawn, in the ancestral chamber of the keep, a circular space with ancient symbols carved into the stone walls, ceiling open to the sky. The moon still hung pale against the pink sunrise. Nina stood in the center wearing something simple, a white dress Dominic had provided, saying it needed to be the color of purity. Her hair was loose, falling in waves down her back. Beside her, Mikael lay in a special cradle decorated with protective runes. And facing her, Dominic. He wore ceremonial clothes, black with gold threading that matched his eyes. He looked every inch the king. But when he met her gaze, there was only the man. An old woman, the court witch called Morgan, stood between them, hands raised. The breaking ritual requires blood, words, and soul union, she declared. Are you ready? Nina looked at Mikael. The baby was quiet but awake, those gold eyes watching everything. Ready, she said. Morgan began to chant in an ancient tongue. The air thickened, charged with magic. The runes on the walls started to glow. Extend your hands, Morgan instructed. Nina and Dominic obeyed. The witch took a ceremonial blade, cutting gently across each of their palms. Blood welled. Nina's bright red, Dominic's darker, almost gold in the light. Join them, Morgan ordered. They clasped hands, blood mingling. The moment they touched, power exploded through the room. Nina gasped as it felt like lightning ran through her veins. Now the words, Morgan said. Repeat after me. I bind my soul to yours, my heart to yours, my life to yours. Where you suffer, I suffer. Where you thrive, I thrive. Until death parts us, and even beyond. Nina and Dominic spoke in unison, the words coming out weighted with more than sound. It was promise, contract, magic. The mark on their chests blazed so bright it was blinding. And then, from Mikael, light erupted, gold and pure, expanding to fill the entire chamber. Nina felt like she was being bathed in liquid sunlight, burning but painless. When the light finally dimmed, Nina opened eyes she hadn't realized she'd closed. The dark mist that had vaguely hung around Mikael, something that had become so constant she'd stopped noticing, was completely gone, and the baby was radiant, literally glowing with health and life that hadn't existed before. The curse is broken, Morgan announced, smiling. The pure heart sacrificed her freedom, and in return, the child is free. Nina didn't feel like she'd sacrificed anything. She just felt whole. Dominic pulled her against him, kissing her without caring about the audience. It was a kiss of gratitude, relief, promise. When they broke apart, he whispered against her lips, Thank you, for saving him, for saving us. We're family now, Nina whispered back. For real. And when Mikael, free for the first time from dark magic, let out a pure, happy baby laugh, both of them knew. They'd won. Chapter 10. Epilogue 3 years later. Nina stood on the balcony, watching the mountains she now called home, when small arms wrapped around her leg. Mama, Daddy said we can go to the forest today. She looked down, and her heart melted, as it always did. Mikael was 3.5 now. Wild dark hair, bright gold eyes, a smile that lit entire rooms. And he called her Mama. had started 6 months after the ritual, and it still brought tears to her eyes. "Did he now?" she said, scooping him up. "And do you think you're ready to see the wolves?" "I'm ready," Mikhail insisted. "I'm strong," Daddy said. "Daddy says a lot of things," Dominic commented, appearing in the doorway. 3 years had softened some lines in his face, but added others. Laugh lines around his eyes, the result of happier years. He crossed to them, kissing Nina first. Long, deep, familiar, then making faces at Mikhail until the boy giggled. "The pack is getting ready for the run," he said. "You sure you're up for it? Not too soon after?" He gestured vaguely at Nina's belly. "Oh, right. That." Nina rested a hand on the slight swell just beginning to show. 4 months pregnant. A miracle the doctor said was impossible, but had happened anyway. Maybe because the magic that broke the curse also healed other things. Or maybe it was just fate. Either way, in 5 months, Mikhail would have a little brother or sister. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Nina said, rolling her eyes. "I can walk through a forest." "You can run through a forest," Dominic corrected, a wicked grin curving his lips. "While I carry our very energetic son." "I want to run too," Mikhail protested. "When you're older," they both said in unison, then laughed. Later, as they walked through the forest, Mikhail on Dominic's shoulders, chattering about every tree and bird, Nina hand in hand with her husband, she let herself feel gratitude. For that Christmas night when everything changed, for the crying baby who'd brought her here, for the king who'd loved her fierce enough to give her time, space, choice, for the family they'd built, not perfect, but real, full of love. "What are you thinking?" Dominic asked, pulling her closer. "That 3 years ago I was alone. No pack, no home, no hope." She looked at Mikhail, then at him. "And now I have everything." "We have everything," Dominic corrected. "Because you chose us. Because you saw past the lies and magic and decided we were worth the risk. Best decision I ever made. Even when I leave clothes on the floor? Even then," she confirmed, laughing. That night, after Mikhail was asleep, exhausted from the adventure, Nina and Dominic stood on their balcony, watching stars. "Did you tell him?" Dominic asked, touching her belly gently. "About the baby?" "Tomorrow," Nina promised. "I wanted you there when we tell him." "I'll always be there," Dominic said. "For everything, good or bad. That's what family means." Nina turned in his arms, kissing him softly. "Yes, that's exactly what it means." And there, under stars that had witnessed their ritual 3 years before, they stood. No longer king and guardian, no longer curse and salvation, just husband and wife, partners, family. The mark on their chests still glowed sometimes, a reminder of how they began. But they didn't need magic anymore, because what they felt for each other, the home they'd built, the life they shared, that was real, and no curse or fate could take it away. The end. Narrator's note. So, you who listened all the way through, which part touched you most? Was it the moment Nina first picked up Mikhail and the mirror heart mark appeared? The revelation about the curse and Dominic's lies? The attack of the dark fog that forced Nina's choice? The night before the ritual when they simply held each other? Or maybe the epilogue, when we see they built a real family, complete with a new baby on the way? The mirror heart mark. This magic where a pup chooses his own guardian, binding souls in ways that transcend blood, was created especially for this story. A way to show that family isn't just about biology, but about choice, about who you decide to protect, about who your heart recognizes as home. And I wonder, do you believe in that kind of instant connection? That sometimes we meet people, whether partners, friends, or even children who need us, and just know they were meant to be in our lives? If this story moved you, leave a comment. Tell me which moment made your heart squeeze, which line kept echoing, which part made you believe in magic. And if you want more stories like this, with vulnerable alpha kings, strong heroines who save themselves while saving others, children who bring families together, and endings that prove love is worth every risk, let me know. because there are thousands of stories waiting to be told, and each one carries the same truth. You're stronger than you think. You deserve to be chosen, and your happy ending is waiting, even in the most unexpected places. Until the next story, my wolves.